So if customers stay to get results and they get results because they change their behavior, then that just begs the question, why do customers change their behavior? In this video, I introduce the third and final law of customer retention and show you the simple process anyone can use to start customers reliably on the road to retention. There are three fundamental laws of customer retention. The first is customers stay to get results. The second law is that customers get results when they change their behavior. Now, I went through both of these in depth in previous videos, and if you haven't seen those videos, I strongly recommend you go watch them before coming back to this one, because in this video, I'm going to introduce the third and final law of customer retention, and it will make a lot more sense to you if you've seen those videos. The first two laws of customer retention really challenge the conventional approach to customer success. Instead of focusing on customer happiness, you shift to focus on customer results. Instead of focusing on customer adoption, we focus on customer behavior change. All of this sets us up for a much more productive approach to driving customer retention. So in order to introduce the third law of customer retention, we need to finish this thought process. If customers get results because they change their behavior, then that just leads to another challenging question, which is, why do customers change their behavior? In order to get our hands around churn and drive high retention, we actually need to understand and unpack this. What makes some customers change and others not? What's going on at the heart of that is critical to long-term retention, because only when customers change do they get results, and it's results that drive long-term retention. So my first reaction when I had this thought was to feel discouraged, because change is hard. I mean, I can't get myself to change, much less other people. And the thought of systematically getting all of my customers to change their behavior was just overwhelming. But I was actually making a mistake in that thought. And it's a really common mistake we make with customers, which is to lump them all together. We know all our customers are not the same, but it's amazing how often when we're talking about customers or working on plans, we just treat them all as one thing, like one monolith. That's a big mistake. It turns out the distinctions between customers give us tremendous leverage over making them successful. And we'll talk about in this video a couple of good examples of that. And the first one is, not all customers need help changing their behavior. If you think about it, some customers arrive ready to go. They have the right ideas, the right plans, they're clear on what they're trying to do, they commit, they execute, they get results, etc. We wish we had more customers like that. But at least initially that shows one reason why this doesn't apply to every customer. Some customers are going to be successful without help. And in a way that proves that customer success isn't exactly for all customers. It's for the customers who aren't going to succeed without it. And in this case, the focus has to be on the customers who will not make the key critical customer behavior changes necessary to get results and therefore retain. So let's start with your experience. What factors have you seen why some customers don't change their behavior? I've seen lack of support from leaders, poor understanding of what needs to be done, they're disorganized, they have a lack of cooperation from key people or departments in the organization, they don't commit enough time or resources to get to success, etc. So you can think, I'm sure, of many reasons. And in fact, it almost seems like there are just too many different reasons. But that's actually wrong. And the way I discovered that that was wrong has to do with something I mentioned in my last video, which is that I would embed myself in customers. I would go to my customers, particularly successful customers, and I would just be there and observe what they were doing, sometimes for days and days. And this was really interesting. And one of the things that it allowed me to do was to pick up each of these threads, each of these reasons why customers didn't change, and sort of follow them to the source. And what I discovered is that there are actually just two things going on. There are really just two underlying reasons why customers don't change. First, they don't know why to change. And second, they don't know how to change. And this is actually the basis of the third law of customer retention, which is customers change their behavior when they know why and how to change. So let's start with the why. Why do customers change? One way to think about this is like motivation. It's about, has this organization established clearly why they're doing this, why it's important, what the outcome is they're driving toward, and how that connects to all the things they'll have to do. Without that, it's impossible to imagine a customer would be motivated to change. Change is hard, right? So unless it relates to something important and that is clearly connected to what they have to do, you can't really expect them to change. And this connects to some of those factors we just talked about. So think about, for instance, leadership support. Are the leaders clear on why this is critical and why their involvement specifically is necessary to ensure it gets done? What about cooperation with other parties? We may understand in our group why we're doing this and why it's important, but do critical partners, people who we rely on to get this done, do they understand it? Are they correctly aligned and motivated with this? Insufficient resources. Is it the case that the organization has properly resourced this project? And if not, why not? Is there a failure of being clear as to why those resources are necessary to accomplish this important goal? So establishing the why really is the foundation. Now, I want to stop here for a second and describe something that I think is important, which is the process I followed to understand this is essentially the reverse of the conventional approach. Conventional approach is the customer journey method. And you know what that is. Essentially, you start with the first interaction you have with a customer, and then you identify, map, design, optimize each subsequent customer interaction you have going out indefinitely. So you start at the beginning and you work forward. My method was essentially the opposite. I started with the end result that we want, which is customers renewing. And then I worked backwards to understand what's necessary to achieve that outcome. So in this case, start with the end result, customers renewing. Well, what has to happen in order for customers to renew? They have to get results. Okay, so what has to happen for customers to get results? They have to change their behavior. Okay, so customers change their behavior, they get results. So then what has to happen for customers to consistently change their behavior? And the answer is they have to know why and how to change their behavior. So it's this working backwards from the end to the beginning that I think is the necessary process. And in fact, it's not that I don't think that the customer journey method is effective. I think it's for a different purpose. So the customer journey method, I think, works very well for designing customer experiences because that's the focus, every interaction and what experience it provides for the customer. But I don't think it's effective for results, for working backwards from how do we produce results. I think you have to do that in the reverse order. There's this great quote from Kierkegaard, which I love. He said, "Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards." And I think that very well captures this idea. In order to understand how results are produced, we have to work backwards from the outcome. And then once we understand that process, we can design it from the beginning to the end. And that's how we live it. Anyway, I thought it was important to kind of point that out because it's actually that method that underlies this whole approach. So when we start with customer results as the end and we work back to the beginning, this is where the process starts. This is the origin point. Do customers fundamentally understand clearly what is the result they're looking for, why it's important, and how it relates to all the things they'll have to do? The first step on the road to churn is the failure to clearly establish the customer's results. And in a way, it's our own fault because we're much too loose in how we talk about benefits and results. We need to be aligned with the customer's purpose, and it has to be something important because obviously the more important the result is to them, the more likely they are to change and get results. So it should surprise nobody that retention is highest for customers who get the best results. And this actually teaches us a little bit about our true target customer. Because who's your ultimate bullseye customer? It's whoever can get the best results. If you think about it, we have different customer use cases, different situations. And if you define what all those groups are, what they look like, and you stack rank them by how good their results are, you shouldn't be surprised that when you go down that list, retention goes down. And so that's why I say the true bullseye customer is whoever you can make the most money, or if not money, then whatever other result you clearly produce. And it means that one of the big drivers of churn is actually selling to the wrong customers. If you're selling to customers who can't get good results for whatever reason, their situation isn't aligned, it's not the right use case, etc., well, then we shouldn't be surprised if churn is very high in that group. And I actually think that one of the biggest reasons for churn is that it comes from being squishy about results, not being clear, not establishing with absolute clarity what are the results we produce and how are they measured and how much can you get, etc. And it's obvious why we are squishy, why we're vague, because we imagine that it allows us to sell more. The more vague we are about the results, theoretically, the more kinds of customers who potentially could find their way in and use the solution. But this is an illusion, actually. Obviously, the worse the results they can get, the higher their churn will be. So that being vague to get more customers in really just leads to more churn. And anyway, does it really increase sales to be vague about results? I argue that it doesn't. My experience is that so many companies are vague and squishy about what they actually do, the results they actually produce, that customers really notice when a company goes in the other direction and establishes and commits to results in a very clear way. And this clarity, it's essential for behavior change. How can customers commit to making hard changes in behavior when they aren't even crystal clear on why, what the result is, and why it matters? In my last video, I talked about this experience you probably had where you get off of a first call with a new customer and you just immediately sense that they're not going to be successful. And we talked about what are the signals that you're picking up on that lead you to that. Well, that's what this is, right? This is a big one. Customers don't always come clearly having established and thought through in a careful way what result they expect. They don't know precisely how that should be understood, how it's achieved, what it is, how it's measured, etc. And as a result, they're not setting up properly right from the beginning to ensure that they do the right things that lead to the results that they are looking for. And so clarity around results is critical to customer behavior change and ultimately to results. So what do we do about it? Actually, we have more leverage over this than you might think, because laying the foundation for successful customer behavior change, it's a pretty simple process that anyone can do. It starts by defining for each customer exactly what results are important and how they'll be measured. Most customers haven't done that. They haven't defined that. They don't arrive with clarity as to what are the results exactly, how much, how will they be measured, etc. And I don't consider that the customer's fault. I think it's our fault. Again, we're too loose about this, but there's another reason it's not their fault. And that is that it takes expertise to be able to answer these questions. In a given area, the specific results that are reasonable to expect, how much, when, how they're measured, these are matters of experience. And in fact, for the most part, our customers don't have this expertise. And really, if you think about it, if they had this expertise, they might not even need us. So it's one of the first critical value points that we can offer our customer is to help them convert their general idea of what they're trying to do into the specific concept of results that's necessary for success. And this is the first step in a simple process that I've developed, which I just call the customer results strategy. And the customer results strategy is simple. It clearly defines the customer's expected results and what it will take to achieve them. And the first element of that is, what are the results that matter? How are they defined? How are they measured? And that's the beginning of the customer results strategy. And it's a great start. It addresses the first pivotal leverage point that we have against customer success. But there's another challenge, because it isn't the case that they just don't know why they need to change. They also often don't know how to change. And in the next video, I'm going to explore why customers don't know how to change, and I'll show you what you can do about it.